TAG was started, I believe, 2003 by the sheriffs of Trumbull, Ashtabula, and at that time Geauga County.
What is the goal of TAG?
Is to enforce drug laws in the state of Ohio, but also to, we basically work on people calling in tips, but also to try to reduce drug crimes being done on the streets of Ashtabula, but also to perform education and with all ages. We do education in schools, we do education with adult groups or organizations. So it is not only enforcement, but it is also education. Well, I think the obstacles that we're facing, and I'm going to speak solely on the enforcement end of it right now because that's something we deal with the most. The obstacles we face right now is a jail that is substandard and is nowhere near capable of handling the problems that we're facing as far as getting people put in jail that need to be in jail. There just is absolutely no space. So we're having a big problem that way. You know, we did a search warrant down in Andover a couple weeks ago, and there was a lot of questions on the blogs and stuff afterward of why these people, they were in handcuffs and then all of a sudden they weren't in handcuffs and why they were released. Well, the big part of that is the reasons is that, and this is probably another big obstacle we're facing, all of our labs are sent to the Ohio BCI in Richfield for testing for all the drugs that we purchase on the street or we get during a search warrant. And they're so overburdened in Richfield because of the heroin epidemic that they've been so far behind, it's taking months to get those labs back. So that in turn has hindered us because if we were to have arrested somebody 2 weeks ago down in Andover, we wouldn't, by the time it made it to the grand jury process, our labs would not have been back. So we would have got to a point where we wouldn't have been able to indict them without those labs. So, because the clock is ticking, we couldn't have held it off. So, between having a problem getting our labs tested, but also the people on the other end, there has been occasions where we have indicted, say, 30 people in one shot. And because of the problems with the capacity at the county jail, we may be able to get warrants on 4 or 5 of those 30. So the other 25 or 26 people are getting their notices for drug trafficking via summons. So basically, accountability is a big problem. And because there is a lack of accountability, because of the lack of jail space, that's one of the reasons why we're probably 7 or 8 out of every 10 people we're charging with trafficking in this county, in Ashtabula County, are Cuyahoga County residents that are moving out here to do nothing but to sell drugs. There's reasons for that, and one of them, and when we've spoken to these folks, some of them have told us it's basically easy pickings. They know the issues out here. There's conversations, so that those two issues, the lack of jail space and the time it's taking us to get lab reports back, have been major struggles.
Does Trumbull have to do the same thing?
Yeah, all Trumbull counties, they all go to BCI Richfield.
Oh, okay.
When we, whether we buy drugs in Ashtabula County or Trumbull County, all of it is submitted into our evidence in our office in Warren. And then we have an evidence officer that transports all of it up to Richfield.
So they must be facing the same issues as far as getting results back.
Definitely on getting the results back. They have a jail that is significantly bigger than ours. So that part of it hasn't been as much of a problem. When they want to get somebody in jail, it's a lot easier to do it down there than we got to call ahead and say, do you have room? And that has been a major problem. There's been talk about a new jail. It needs to happen more sooner than later. With that being said, this is only one facet of this drug problem, or to try to correct this drug problem. So the deterrent end has to be one of the 3 arms of this, whether it's education or whether it's treatment. But right now, we're crippled because really we don't have enough out there in any of the 3. You think about last year in the state of Ohio, we had over 3,000 people die of drug overdoses. You also think about if over 3,000 people would have died last year in the state of Ohio because of a mosquito bite, there would be, you know, the public would be in an outcry. We as a society have not come to the point, and at some point we need to be a little more alarmed or feel a better sense of urgency when it comes to what we're facing right now. And until we get to that sense of urgency, we're going to continue. I really myself don't know what the answer is. I mean, we have dug a big hole, and it seems like when we try to crawl out, we're throwing more dirt down on top of us.
Now, the opioid crisis, which is nationwide, must have created a much more difficult problem for you handling this.
Yes, and again, I'm going to go back to this. If you think back a couple years ago, we had a problem with bath salts, okay? And the Ohio legislature acted very quickly because basically what would happen is the people that were making these bath salts, the legislature would make a law, and then these people making it would change a molecule in the substance, and that would make that a non-controlled substance. Well, finally, and this happened over a pretty quick period of time, the legislature acted and put a blanket over all of it, and we haven't had the problems like we were having with bath salts. With that being said, probably 3 years ago, we started seeing our labs come back for BCI, our heroin labs, come back with fentanyl in it. And fentanyl is a Schedule II drug, where heroin is a Schedule I drug. So fentanyl is up to 100 times more powerful than morphine or heroin. But yet, you can buy 12 grams of heroin and it makes it a felony of the third degree. There's been times where we've gotten labs back and it's been 12 grams of straight fentanyl, which is, again, more powerful, and it's a felony 5. So my point with this is that a criticism I have is that the legislature, when it comes to fentanyl and carfentanil, aren't acting fast enough. We have seen this. This is something that I've spoke on before. You got a more dangerous drug. And with that being said, I mean, you have a person out there, an addict out there, that is using what they think is heroin at the same level that they normally use heroin at, and it ends up being fentanyl. That's why we're having a lot of these overdose deaths. Okay, so in my mind, this isn't something of some surprise. We've been having a problem, and it's getting bigger with fentanyl and carfentanil. Now we're seeing a lot more labs come back now with carfentanil in it, which is, again, even more powerful than the fentanyl is. Carfentanil is a elephant tranquilizer. So you think about that, and we've been, as far as the laws, we've been slow to react. I've been told by a local legislator there's a bill down in Columbus, but it seems like that bill must be in quicksand down there because, like I said, I did the comparison earlier because they can act fast when they want to. So I myself, as an investigator, do not understand why it has been so slow to catch up. The fentanyl we're dealing with right now, and the carfentanil, isn't actually coming from the drug companies.
Okay.
A lot of it is being shipped here from China. They're buying it on the internet. Okay, so the fentanyl, I mean, I'm not saying, I mean, originally when we were seeing fentanyl, a lot of it was from the patches and stuff like that, but that has not been the case in the last couple years. So we can't blame the carfentanil and the fentanyl issue on the drug companies. Now, when it comes to the drug companies, and again, it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. We, as not only the United States, but also the state of Ohio, we waited too long. We didn't enforce rules such as, we had a problem with doctor shopping. People would go to multiple doctors in a month and get pain medications, and there was not enough checks and balances. Well, finally, the state of Ohio acted on that, and we, as far as TAG goes, are not seeing the pill cases like we did before. Unfortunately, what they're doing on the state level, as far as suing the companies, and on the federal level, they're now, I'm hearing after the news show, a program there, 60 Minutes thing a couple weeks ago. They're trying to do something with that bill that was enacted. But the problem on the state level is we aren't seeing a pill problem like we used to. Most of the people that are, it's a heroin problem now. And a lot of these cases, the horse has left the barn. I mean, what they're doing is good. It's unfortunately probably, and again, like I said, it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, but it had been good 10 years ago. Because if we would have done some of these with the pain medication 10 years ago, I don't feel that we would have the heroin problem we have today. Because we reacted slow, and nobody could have seen it. Nobody in the world could have guessed probably that it was going to come to what it has come to. And unfortunately, that is the biggest contributor of why we're where we're at. That's our methamphetamine problem has morphed over the last 6 months. You know, we've in Ashtabula County have been historically very high in meth labs in the state of Ohio, but that is all changing, and it's only because of methamphetamine coming from out of state that is cheaper that it is curtailing our meth labs in this county, because the addicts, the meth addicts, don't have to go to the backyard meth cook to get his meth. Why pay? I mean, it's up to a point where at times it's half price to get it, meth being brought here from the southern border and from California. So it's made a big difference with that.
Would it be more accurate to say, well, a lot of times that it's actually a fentanyl overdose instead of a heroin overdose?
The vast majority of the cases now are, yes, they're overdosing on fentanyl. They're taking it with the knowledge or the thought that it's heroin, but a lot of times it still is heroin, but it's probably the fentanyl that is causing the overdose. And with that being said, then it puts more of a burden on our EMS, because you're having to use more Narcan kits than you would have had to before. We do talks in all levels of schools. We're actually trying to focus a little bit on even some of the younger kids. We're trying to get into that end of it a little bit more. We do talks for community groups. We actually have a couple talks next month at a couple of the libraries in Ashtabula, at Ashtabula Library and the Geneva Library, and that is focused towards adults. So that way that maybe they'll know what to look for if they have an adult child living with them, or even a school-age kid, what to look for, and just be aware of their environment. Because I have found that when we go to schools and do education, a lot of those kids, I'm not telling them anything they don't know. I think the adults are are more ignorant to the circumstances or what is going on out there than the kids are.
So what is made heroin so popular in your mind?
Well, a good percentage of it, and we go back to the pills. You know, when when the state of Ohio did put the clamps on to make sure that doctors are checking in the state database to see if somebody is getting pain medication somewhere else, they basically squeezed that element. People that were abusing the pills, squeezed them out into the heroin world. Also, I have found that almost every heroin search warrant we do, there's weed or marijuana in every one of them. These people are all using marijuana in association. So I'm not here to say that just because you use marijuana, you're going to go use heroin, but there are some elements of society that are weak to addiction to begin with, or have addictive traits. It's going to spur them, and we've spoke to kids. That's one thing about it, is that we talk to people. You know, I try to, whether it's at search warrants or even people that we arrest, I try to talk to them so I can become more knowledgeable on what drives them or what drove them to get to using heroin. And you got a combination of things. And then there's just the peer pressure. There's people out there that that's helped sometimes in some areas, whether it's in high school or right after high school, where peer pressure drove them into that first use. And then after that first use, they're doomed. So there's any number of things. I would say the majority of it is what started with the opiate pills and the abuse of opiate pills, but those other two factors play into this.
I was going to say, because most, say the younger high school kids usually haven't had a chance to get addicted to painkillers or opioid
Right.
pills.
A lot
But
of
I
that's
can
peer
see that
pressure.
in the late 20s, 30s, or even 40s where that could happen.
Well, when you see somebody that's 50, 60 years old overdosing on heroin, 90% of those people started with opiate pills. They were addicted to opiate pills and got shut off. So when you're seeing an older person overdose, it's usually somebody that started their problem with opiate pills. And that's one thing too, we go back to the education. And this is something that parents gotta understand, but we also tell the kids, but the parents need to hear this too, is that, you know, you're a high school age kid and you break an arm or tear up a knee playing softball or whatever, and you go to a doctor, just because he writes you a prescription for pain medication doesn't mean you have to take it. Okay, to me, I would suggest to any parent with a kid with those circumstances is to try Advil, Tylenol, whatever first. Because if you don't start using it, then you won't, you can't come addicted to it.
But there doesn't seem to be that fear of dying that you would.
I think kids, no matter what, that's why they drive 150 mile an hour or whatever. They at that age, they feel it ain't gonna happen to me. I think a lot of people, even with the peer pressure, you know, they're led to believe, oh, it ain't gonna happen to you. One time, it's not gonna hurt. So I think that a lot of it is that it's, even with all the people dying, there's still an element that people are just, it ain't gonna happen to me.
What were some of the things you'd like to see done to try to curb the use of this?
Well, we need to, first off, we need to focus or send money to programs that have proven to work. We need to start thinking out of the box a little bit. You know, the first thing you ever hear when you hear about grant money or money coming any form from the state, they throw out this, well, we have to have a separation of church and state stuff. You know, I'm not here trying to push any kind of, but there are organizations, religious organizations or faith-based organizations that have had some success. We need to, and I'm not saying they all do, there isn't a foolproof answer to anything, but if we have a certain group or we see a certain group are working a certain way, that's where we gotta put the money. We gotta stop sending money to groups that aren't performing. I mean, we talk about regular schools, I mean, and underperforming schools. You know, we need to, again, it's the same thing. You know, just throwing money at a problem isn't gonna fix it. So that is part of it. But also, I think, and this is a big problem, is no matter how good your rehab places are, what happens is these people go through rehab, go through our drug court, and then what happens? They go right back and live in the same environment they came from. We're setting them up to fail. That is absolutely, we're wasting money. We need to have more step-down organizations or places for these people to go in between treatment and being released back on the street. Because what we need to do, these people come out of rehab, they got no driver's license, they got no jobs, they got no work ethic, and then they're going back and having to deal with the same family, the same friends, and we need to address that. We need to have more of these step downs that can help them get a driver's license and help them get a work ethic, getting up in the morning, and teach them how that, because a lot of these people never, as kids, never were taught this. So we need to give them tools so when they get out, they have more of a chance of succeeding, or they have an option. I don't need to go back to live on Street A where I grew up on. I can move somewhere else because I have a driver's license. I have a job. We need to, and that isn't a foolproof thing. I think addiction is such a powerful thing, but we need, right now, we're not sending them in a direction that is that I think that we're gonna pass. They're gonna fail, and the vast majority are gonna fail.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for that.
Sure.
You're sounding like a do-gooder liberal.
I'm probably a little more of a conservative person, but I also am a realist. And, you know, putting everybody, I mean, there are definitely, and I'll say this, that's why I said we need a bigger jail. Not everybody needs to be in jail, but, you know, part of the problem is the state of Ohio, again, in our sentencing, whether it's, we treat our addicts the same way we treat our traffickers in the state of Ohio. I mean, all the way up through the felony levels, it is the same charge to possess an amount of heroin as it is to sell the same amount of heroin. So that is a flaw in the system and needs to be addressed. We need to deal more with some of the traffickers, and we need to address some of the problems with the addicts that aren't getting addressed. It's the same people going through and through the system. So I have a, we can call it liberal, I call it compassionate. I also understand that don't wear out your welcome. And like I said, we need to treat this, you know, especially the younger kids right now. We need to get to them. I mean, we really need to get to the younger kids. But no matter, even at that level, you know, whether it's me, whether it's their teacher, whether it's their pastor, they can talk to them all they want. But what they see and hear at home is going to have a lot more weight than anything we do. So, you know, it's just, we've really created an environment that we have a struggle ahead of us that it isn't going to be cured anywhere near the time I'm still here. One other issue that I'm seeing as far as an obstacle, obviously, on the enforcement end is manpower. We have, myself and Detective Nelson are the only two full-time guys that are just doing drugs in Ashtabula County or working drug cases. The cities, primarily Ashtabula, has had guys, when they get away from the rapes, the robberies, the burglaries, that did drug cases. Or if they had a street guy do a drug case and then they became involved. And we have been working with Ashtabula City, and they've assigned us a detective, Mike Palinkas. We're still trying to iron out. They're still short on the road, so it is trickling down. It's affecting. So once Ashtabula City is able to hire a couple more uniform guys, I think that Mike is going to be with us at the task force more often. And Geneva, from the beginning, I mean, Geneva from the time, probably 6 years, Geneva City has been the leader amongst all the jurisdictions in Ashtabula County of putting a guy. They have Chris Cahill assigned to the task force, and he's usually with us 3 to 4 days a week. And Geneva is not seeing any financial money back for that. This is coming out of the leadership of Chief Dudick and the city manager, Doug up there, that showing leadership. To me, that's part of trying to do something with the problem. So I made a presentation last week to the Ashtabula County Crime Clinic, which is the Chiefs Association. All the police chiefs are part of that, to the villages. And we're waiting to set up a meeting in November to try to, any of the 5 big villages, Roaming Shores would be the 6th, but I've talked mainly the 5 that have full-time coverage, Geneva on the Lake, Jefferson, North Kingsville, Andover, and Orwell. I spoke to them, and them individually can't afford to put somebody on a task force and lose that road position. So basically my presentation to them, or the idea I gave to them, was that if they all pot up their money and attach one guy to the task force, and that guy will be the conduit to the 5 villages, but also they would be responsible basically for paying for a guy. They could pick, the chiefs could pick somebody from one of those agencies to do it for a year to see how it would work. And the villages, basically each village would be responsible for paying his salary one day a week. They have to worry about paying. So it'd be almost like putting a guy on the task force 1 day a week. But you have more continuity having one person, and then they share the costs of it. So that was a presentation I made last week to the Crime Clinic, and hopefully it was, it seemed to be fairly well received, and we're going to set up another meeting to try to get that ball rolling. So.
Cool.
So right now, I think the big thing with Conneaut right now is, again, financial. They need, and I'm going to say this, they need to be with us. We're able to do more work in any of the jurisdictions if we have the jurisdictions laying the groundwork for us. When you only have 2 and maybe 3 guys to do this, you need the uniform guys on the road. They're our eyes and our ears, and we need that input from those jurisdictions. Conneaut, I know, is, like I said, they're like everybody else, financial struggles. So we're hoping that we move back in the direction of getting somebody 2 or 3 days a week from Conneaut. We've spoke to the chief about it, and he's very receptive to it, but again, it comes down to the bottom line. We just need the public to educate themselves. They need to, if we tag, like I said, we have a Facebook page, we have a website, we do educational, we're doing more and more. So if you need somebody to come talk to your group, your school, any other, contact us, and we're more than willing to do that. The number down there is 330-675-7891. You'll get one of our girls in the office, and they'll get a hold of Tony or I, and we can set something up. But we are available. One thing about it is, and nobody likes to hear this, but with any problem, like I said, I don't agree with throwing money at something just to get it, but my feeling is, and I think is that we can't do the enforcement end of this and do it anywhere near adequately enough with 2 full-time people. And one of those 2 is being paid for by a grant. So basically, the sheriff is paying, okay? We need this is a county problem. We need every entity from the smallest township to the biggest city to take ownership of it. And I think we're working in that direction, but we have a ways to go. So there's a lot of drugs in some of the smallest townships down south. So we can't turn a blind eye to it. The tag Facebook page, all you gotta do is go on Facebook and just type in Trumbull Ashtabula group or tag Ohio, and it should pop up. And then through that you can send messages that our girls check daily during the week. They'll reply if you have any concerns. If you want to send tips, we can receive tips through Messenger on our Facebook page. And again, when we talk about tips, don't give up when you don't see results right away. Again, I'm going to go back to having the manpower we have. Sometimes it may take a year. I'll be flat out frank. A lot of times people will call in tips and they may not ever see a result unless the person moves out or so it's a reality. I'm not going to blow smoke. But we need you to keep calling or keep messaging it, because it does a lot of times, that squeaky wheel a lot of times does work. I can think of a house that we're working on right now that we've been getting complaints on for 2 and 3 years. But we finally got the right connection for that house, and we're dealing with it, and it's going to be dealt with. So keep letting us know. I know Ashtabula City has a drug tip line. We share our information with Ashtabula City. So if you live in Ashtabula City, you can always call their tip line or send it to our tag Facebook page.